What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another GGF video, and today I'm going to be talking about the recent build I did in the Lian Li 217 Infinity. So I did a time-lapse build about 2 weeks or so ago when the case launched. I'm also going to talk about how you can actually control the front of this chassis, because that is the main difference in this Infinity compared to the previous 217 versions. So can't really see the front at the moment. I didn't want to angle it straight on because it does have that infinity mirror. You would just see all the reflections. So I'm going to go through the software, show you how you can control that, because I was quite surprised how you can actually do that. I just thought it would have been done via the two buttons on the top. There's a button for the fan control for the RGB, and there's a button for the actual RGB in the infinity mirror panel. So you can control that, but you can also control it wirelessly as well if you have an L-Connect wireless controller. So I'll talk about that. Also, I want to talk about the also recently launched the 8.8 universal screen from Lian Li. I actually did miss this launch. I was over in Australia celebrating my birthday, so I did miss that. I was pretty gutted because I would have loved to have showcased this, showcased what you can do. I'm not going to do a full review, a full video on the screen, because so many people have covered this. It is a great screen. It is quite affordable, but I've been doing screens in my builds, I would say, for the at least 10 years or so, but it's finally good to see a universal option. As you can see, universal screen. This is truly universal. The amount of sort of mounting options where you can put it on fans, sort of on the back of a chassis, pretty much anywhere you want, is really cool. I'll talk about that. And then lastly, something that just came in, actually, these are actually upside down if you can see those. These are Lian Li's recently launched SX range of PSUs. They come in 850, 1000 and 1200. They're pretty affordable for platinum rated. They're quite small as well. They're about 140 millimeters in sort of length or depth, however you measure it. So they'll fit in a majority of cases. They're not SFX, they're standard ATX, but they're more of a smaller ATX form factor. So jumping on to the 217, not going to talk too much about the case itself. It's very similar to the original 217. The main changes is that front panel. The fans are still 170 millimeter. Yes, it is an odd size. I guess that's where the chassis gets its name from, 217. 170 millimeters for the two fans. They're not sort of different than standard fans. They are normal standard fans, but they're just encased in this really funky speaker looking shroud that you can twist, and you can pull the actual, I would call it a dust filter. It's not a fine dust filter, but it is a bit of a dust filter. So you can twist each one of those off. You can take them out. It's pretty cool. You could like customize and paint them, do whatever you want. So once you pop that off, you can actually see the fan is quite standard. It does have RGB built in, and then you have that mirror around the side. So that are the main changes for the front of the chassis there, as the previous one was more of your traditional vented sort of grille and mesh. So I want to talk about the three main ways you can customize the front RGB lighting, because when I was setting this up, I kind of thought, well, how have they done it? Because as you see in this build, I wanted two contrasting colors for the front. I wanted a purple, and then I wanted something different. I went with like an orangey yellow, and I thought, hey, first off, is it going to just be all one color option? Are they going to be changeable? I checked the manual. You can change them. There's a mode 1 or an M1 and then an M2. So you can change the different colors for the fan separately to the actual RGB on the infinity mirror. Now, when it comes to the options, you are limited, because that is a little mini RGB controller built into the top there. You have no brightness control. Now, I do want to mention brightness control because I think that is very, very important. Most of the times when cases have RGB control on the front panel of the case, you aren't going to get brightness control. Now for me, brightness control is a must, because especially when filming, I have all of the RGB in this chassis set to like 5 to 10%. Going off on a little bit of a different area here, especially with memory. Memory, I need to set to like, I had this memory set to like 1 or 2% brightness, because anything higher absolutely sort of explodes it out, and it goes absolutely crazy, and it just looks white, overexposed. So brightness control is important to me. But I think it's also important for the end user, because they don't want everything glaring at 100%. My cats are just fighting right over here. Give me one sec. All right, so brightness control is important for that. And most of the time when you have it on the front panel case control, you don't get that option. Now, the second option of control is you can offload it to your motherboard RGB header. You just hold like a combination of the buttons, and it'll cycle through the different ways you can control it through the case, through the motherboard offloading, and then onto the wireless software is the next option. But doing the motherboard control is, you're not going to get the independent fan RGB control to the infinity mirror control. It's just going to be one color, because there is only one RGB cable that's coming out from this front panel controller off to your motherboard. So just be wary of that. But the next option, which I highly recommend, is the L-Connect wireless control. So there is actually a built-in wireless receiver that's sort of at the back at the top here. Everything is plugged in, ready to go. Now the two front 170mm fans are connected. The rear 140, or it was 140, I've actually replaced this. That's why it sort of confused me. It comes with a 140 at the rear. I've got a 120, but that is also connected in there. Everything's powered, ready to go. All you need to do is plug in the SATA power, and that is it. Turn it on. You do need a wireless L Connect controller, which I've got because I used the latest TL Infinity wireless fans. If you don't want to use these fans, you can still pick up a wireless controller from Lian Li for 25 bucks. Now that's pretty good. Throw that in there and that'll allow this to fully sync up, and away you go. You might be thinking, well, why didn't they include the controller? Well, this case is already 125, 130 bucks. I think adding that controller that maybe not everyone would want to use would bump it up to, say, 150, a little bit more. So I think that's why they kept it down, not throwing in the controller. So using the wireless Connect controller doesn't just control the RGB lighting, it also controls all the fan speeds for those pre-installed fans. So that includes the two 170s at the front and also the 140 at the rear. Now I have removed that 140 at the rear, as I mentioned earlier, but you can see the 217 front fan shows up. But if you were using the rear one would show up as well, but I have actually removed that and unplugged that, so you can set all of your settings. I've set it to quiet at the moment because I am filming, I am recording this. I didn't want it to be too noisy. So that's pretty good, you can do all that. Then when you move to the L wireless utility, scrolling down, obviously I've got 3 banks of my fans. I've got the top, the bottom, and then the rear. But what I want to look at is the number 4, which is the 217 INF. Now this is where you get your control, and it's pretty sweet how it actually shows an image of the case. Now, as you can see, as I'm highlighting over these, you can select what options you want. But first off, what you need to do is this lighting sync. You need to change this from on to off. That's if you want to control it separately, which I wanted to do. So obviously, if you want to control the front infinity panel only, you set this to off, then you click on the lighting effect, and now you can see this little area here has highlighted to the sort of square box at the front. You don't have to click the image, you can just simply change it by clicking on this down here. So if I select the square box at the front, that is the infinity lighting. I can set the color, you choose that, and then away you go. I've set it to static because I do like everything static for when I'm filming. And then I mentioned brightness control. Now, as I said earlier, that is important to me. You can see that is right here, and I've got that set to 50%. That wasn't too overexposed like some of the other areas in the chassis. Things like memory, fans are very bright. The infinity lighting is a very fine line, so it wasn't too bright. So I set that to 50. Now I could go down to somewhere like the fans, drop down that box, and as you can see, I've got those set to orange. Now, I think the only cool thing for that would have been if when you change the color for the RGB, it actually changed it in this little image here. That would have been sick. Then you can actually see what you've actually set. So I played around with all the different modes. There's so many here: rainbow, rainbow morph, static color, breathing, runaway, meteor, so many. Obviously when I do my builds, I just like something simple like static, especially when I take photos as well. Static I think is the best option, because if I have a certain pattern, every photo is going to look a little bit different because it depends on where that pattern is up to when it's doing the actual motion on that fan. So that's why I like everything set to static. So that's basically the control of the chassis there. I didn't really cover too much, but I just wanted to cover that a little bit on the lighting because that's how I experienced when I did do this build. It was absolutely flawless. I was kind of wrapping my head around how I was going to tackle this, and then I found out it had that wireless control. I was pretty stoked, and it actually worked really well. Now moving on to the 8.8-inch universal screen. Now this was the first time I used this in this build, and once again, it was a pleasure to use, and it's good to use something that wasn't from, say, AliExpress, something I had to use an AIDA64 custom sensor panel. Obviously, the themes are built into the Lian Li software. You can customize your own, and you can download more as well. So I have opened this up, got everything out of the packaging. So this is the screen here. It's probably got a lot of my fingerprints on and all that. It's going to get my reflections. So it is a standard 8.8-inch. Now I used to order these off when I was back in Australia. AliExpress was the only place that used to have these. I used to spend over $100. Then there was shipping. That was just the screen. They came with a little ribbon cable, a little daughter board that I used to stick on the back. Had your micro USB, didn't even have USB-C. Micro USB for power. It had a mini HDMI or micro HDMI for the display. That was it. That was like 10 years ago. I used to put some in spare cable grommet holes. I thought was really good. I'm not really a fan of just sticking them sort of right out in the middle over something. I always like to incorporate them into the build, whether it's somewhere like over a cable grommet hole that's being unused, which is pretty cool. I've also done it behind two-way mirror, something that's really cool I've done on cases. If you could envision this being a whole two-way mirror, you can put a screen behind the two-way mirror, providing that the mirror is the right way. When the system's off or the screen's not on, you just get 100% mirror. Then when you put light behind a two-way mirror, you can see the sensor panel. And I'll throw up some images I've got or some content I've used these screens in all these scenarios, and might give you ideas on what you can do. I've used little round screens for holes. I've also used screens where there's been unwanted pass-through holes in cases. Now, if you've got a bunch of pass-through holes that aren't being used, you don't have to use heaps of little screens for each little hole. You can just use a big screen, put it behind all the holes, and then you just line up all of your little graphs and all your little pie graphs or whatever you want behind those little holes. I've even done full case options where you've had like an SFX case or an SFF case actually, where it just runs the full length of the chassis. It goes from top to bottom. Obviously this case is a little bit large to go top and bottom, but I've done builds like that where it fits that nicely. I've even done motorized ones where it's being sort of below an area on the case. So pretend this mount isn't here. You've just got this. I've had it where it goes in the back and it slides up. I actually used Lego, motorized Lego that connects to your phone. It actually goes up and then it can go back down. So I've done so many different options, but it's finally good to see an actual mount that comes with the screen. I probably could have got in before Lian Li and come up with some patented design, but I probably missed the mark on that one because the amount of options and the amount of things I've done with mounting screens and cases has just been endless. But now it's good to see that we finally have an option. We have this clamp here that can actually go, I should actually get the white one, might be easier. White one with the black bracket. And I can show you. So we have a bunch of holes. I must admit they are very, very fine. Mounting this bracket onto the back here took a little bit. You need to use a supplied screwdriver that's very, very fine because those holes are super, super. I think they're like M2, maybe even less than M2 threads. You can mount this however you want in the center, offset, and so on. And then this bracket can slide. It is a little bit tight. Can slide this way, and then it can also slide in and out this way like that. I'm just trying to get the best view for you guys that way. And then it can also rotate. It's very stiff. Sometimes it feels like I'm going to break it. You can also rotate like this. So I won't mount all the options now. I'll just throw up some shots of B-roll where you can mount it to, like, if your PC's on the desk like that, you can mount it like this. You can mount it inside like I've done. You can even just, I believe they provide just some sticky adhesive tape you can mount it on. So the options are pretty much endless. It also gives you one 20 and one 40mm fan support. This is the extra bracket. There are actually 2 screws in there that came out. They give you the extra little extension bracket to mount it on to like that if you want to mount it onto a 140mm fan. So mounting options are endless. I was pretty stoked when the screen actually came out, but I think the biggest part of this would be how the software is done. Because normally when I set up a screen in a build, I'm like, sick, the build is done. And I spend like another 3 or 4 hours using something like AquaSuite AIDA64. I really like AquaSuite from AquaComputer. That works really well. I think that's the cleanest looking sensor panel software, but you do need a piece of AquaComputer hardware to install that software. If you don't have a bit of their hardware, it doesn't detect it, you can't install their software. Now, a bit of a trick I got away or around doing that, if you just have one piece of their hardware, you can install the software and then unplug that hardware. You don't need their hardware always connected in the system to run their software. So that's a bit of a loophole. So I just keep one of their cheapest items, just plug it in USB, install their software. I can create a sensor panel. It doesn't need their whichever piece of hardware that you've used, just so I can install that software. And then I can get their sensor panel going up, and it can also link into like HW info, all those extra sensors. So once I would get the build going, it took me so long to get the sensor panel set up. that it was crazy. But now with the Lian Li software, we have everything ready to go, and you can even customize it as well. I'm just going to quickly plug in this screen here so we can see what it looks like, and then I'll go over the software. So what also surprised me with this screen is it's also got ARGB sort of edge lighting around the screen. So it's all built in. It's hard to see in my build. I think it's harder to see on the white screen. If you've got a white sensor panel or a white theme, that edge lighting is a little bit hard to see inside. So as you can see now, hopefully we can see that pretty good. I'll try not to get some reflections. It is lit up like that. And it does look really cool. And there's lots of options you can do with that edge lighting. I just set it to static and then boom, away we go. I actually got this set up on my laptop before I had this sensor panel. Now, when it comes to sensor panels, when it's inside your case like this, I've always had a bit of a gripe. It's just my personal taste. I'm not sort of hating on anyone. I like to do the biggest sensor panel that's possible. Something like this, something you can see when you're sitting at your desk. If you glance to your right to look at your stats, you can see it. A lot of times I see people have a million little things on the screen that their biggest icon is like the size of the GPU. There's no way you're going to see that. I kind of think like, why have a sensor panel if you can't see any of the icons? And you don't need a million things. You need GPU temp, CPU temp, some of the main things like load and all of that, your max and your minimums. That's it. Something nice and big. This does have rotation as well in the software. I'll show you that. Obviously, if you've got it set up like this, you can rotate it. And then if you've got it set up like this, you can set it back to landscape as well. Another neat little thing is there's, I wouldn't say dual inputs, but you can use either one of these inputs. There's one on the edge here, and then there's one on this side. So depending on how you have it mounted, you have multiple options. I would have maybe liked one at the other end, but it just, guess you can just turn it around. I had no issues with my orientation. I was able to get the cable nice and clean out of the way. I haven't really mentioned the specs. You're looking at 1920 by 480, 1920 by 480. It is 8.8 inch, 60 hertz, 500 nits. USB only, which is good. It doesn't offload it to your GPU, anything like that, but there is a little trick in the software. You can use this to extend to a secondary monitor. So if you've got like your main monitor here on your desk, all you need is a USB. You could run this to like a USB hub, something like that. You can mount this. I'm sure you could probably set this up where it could act as like a little desk mount like this. It isn't touchscreen or anything like that because the screen is pretty affordable, but you could just have it sitting down like this and you can have it as an extended monitor from your main system. So now we're back in the L-Connect 3 software. Before I talk about the screen a little bit more, I did want to mention that it comes with I'll actually unplug this so we can see. So if you're running this in your PC, obviously you're going to want to run the internal USB header. You can run that out the back, down the bottom, pop it up, plug it into your USB 2 motherboard header. But if you want to run this, as I said earlier, as a extension of your primary monitor, you obviously aren't going to want to run this all the way into your PC because it's not going to reach. They do give you this little adapter from internal USB to standard USB type A that looks like USB 2. Plug that straight in. Like, it's not super long, but you can always order these off Amazon. You can order nice ones and so on, and then away you go. So let's let this boot up a little bit. Now we can see universal screen is here. So this one here that's already showed up is the one in the system. I'm not going to talk about that one because that's going to be hard to see. But as you can see, this is the default template I use. I just went in their software. Over here, there's a bunch of themes that are already preloaded, but the beauty of this is we can add a second one. I don't know how many screens you can add. I could probably try that. I'll put it in the description. I'm not going to go through it all now. I'll throw this other one because I've actually got 4. I'll throw this one up and see if you can have 3. I think 3 is probably a little bit much, but as you can see, we just got a default black screen. As you can see, nothing over here. I can just choose, where's one that looks cool? This one, hit apply, then away we go. That's on there, and look at that. It's just detected everything. So it's got like GPU, GPU load, GPU clock rate over here. So it looks like I've got CPU on this side, all GPU stats here, RAM in the middle. I don't know about having RAM in the middle, but you can obviously change that. I would put something maybe CPU or GPU, and then we got like a bit of a bar graph on the CPU clock rate and the GPU clock rate. So I think this is probably, from what I've tested so far, the easiest solution out there on getting templates and themes up and going with the least messing around. You don't need a third-party hardware sensing program like HWinfo or AIDA64 running in the background. Everything is just built in, and these themes are here ready to go. For the screen lighting, you may see that this is all to do with the actual screen template and design, we can actually click on the edge here. It actually tells you to control the lighting effect LCD screen, click on the corresponding area. So obviously the middle will be for all the themes, and then the edge is for the lighting. So at the moment it's rainbow. That doesn't quite look too good with this theme. We've got like a black and a red theme, so I could go something like my favorite static. Let's go with the, no, that might be a little bit too bright of a red. Let's go for more of a darker red, something like this. Set that, set apply, then boom, it is done. Nice red, and that looks really sick. So like if you had this as a sensor panel somewhere, you got a black and red system, something like ROG, obviously this build here, completely different looking style, but that's definitely something you can go with. Then to go back with to the actual theme setup, click on the center, away you go. So then the templates are all over here. We can also look at customs. So you can upload an image, and I won't go into all of this, like it's got all the design templates here, and then you got modular, you can add all of this stuff. So this is similar to areas like AIDA64 where you would create your own custom sensor panel, but I think this is much easier. You can just add this over, you can set the size of it. It's very user friendly. You can change the layout, things like font, all the text, everything like that. You can actually probably spend so long doing this, but I think so long as in a good way that you're not wrapping your head around trying to get it to work. This actually works really well, and from my experience is this sort of the least hassle option when it comes to setting up these screens. But for me, this build, I just used the basic template, which was this one here, hit apply, and then away you go. Want to change the lighting, let's go to static color, let's set this to like a white, something like that, apply, and look at that, I've just fully changed that on the fly. We are good to go. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention on this screen is if you go to additional, you can go to secondary screen. Now, I didn't think this was going to work. I didn't think they implemented this. So once you click on this, you have to wait a little bit as it's doing some stuff. Now we've lost the screen in the software, but I have now extended this onto my Windows. So if I go to display settings, you can now see I have a secondary screen, and I can move this over. It's going to be overexposed like this. Now, I've reached out to companies that do the all-in-one coolers that have screens where you plug it into USB, like you have the big curved screens on your all-in-one coolers. I've always asked, why don't they offload or have an option? Because those ones are just USB. Why don't they have it so they can extend the desktop? So you could throw things like Twitch on it. You could throw things like YouTube videos. Most of the times the software for the all-in-one coolers that have a screen, you can only upload an image or upload a video. That's not very good. Why would you just want to play back a video or something? So having this being live, you can throw YouTube, you can throw live streams on it. If only companies could incorporate this tech into the ones on the all-in-one coolers, I think that would be a step above the rest. Now moving back to the software, to change that back out, we do need to go to the screen and we need to turn that option off. It will take a little bit. It does a bit of configuring, and then we've lost the screen out of Windows, and now we're back with our secondary screen. It actually does a little bit of a reboot, and now we are back. Now, a few other options you can also do. You can throw things like images on this, animated GIFs and all that. I think that's a bit of a waste. I would definitely use this as a secondary screen, or I would use it to show sensor stats like this. And then lastly, we have on the right here, full rotation on this screen. So we can rotate it this way, that's gone upside down, and we can flick it this way. Or if you go on the bottom option here, we can change it from being, so the layout will soon switch, blah, 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 okay. And it'll tell us we can change it back, yep. So now we've now switched it from being in a vertical option. I think I do need to reapply this theme because we have changed it. Let's apply this one. There we go. We've now set it to this one. So if you do change it from portrait to landscape, you do need to reapply the theme because it has to adjust all the themes from portrait to landscape. And then I can also do a 180 on that and flick it around this way. So $85 for this screen. I actually think that is tremendous value. I think some people were saying that it was a little bit overpriced, but come on. I even look at a bunch of these on Amazon and some of them still go over 100. Some of them are like $50, $40. I'm a little bit skeptical on those ones. That should be good. If you want me to do a comparison, try and find the most affordable one. I think I could probably find one for 30, 40 bucks. Compare this one and then compare something to say like 100 and so on. Even some that are over 100 aren't even touch. But let me know if you think touch is important. Obviously, inside your chassis, touch isn't going to be important. It'd only be if it's like under your monitor, as like a secondary monitor. You can use touch options, but then again, it is a little bit small to be able to use it as a touchscreen, I think. So moving on to the last thing, this video is probably going on for a little bit. I just want to cover a new product that Lian Li launched, and that's their new SX Platinum PSUs. They come in 1200, 1000, and 850. I was going to use it in this build here, but there was one slight problem. I'll talk about that in a second. So here's the 80 Plus Platinum, ADX 3.1 ready, PCIe 5.1, all of that, 10-year warranty. Highlight feature is it does have 5 PCIe and CPU, so they are combo. I always like that. I've never liked PSU that have dedicated CPU and dedicated PCI. It limits you. Having both of them both the same works well. And the reason why I like 5 is if you're running something like a current or a high-end AMD GPU that needs 3 8-pin PCIe, so say 1, 2, 3, you still have 2 left for your CPU. If you're running a standard ATX board, most of them need dual EPS 8 pins. Not like you really need the dual 8s on most CPUs. I know the real high-end ones if you're doing overclocking, but it's always good to have that flexibility. So 2 for your CPU, 3 for your beefy AMD video card, and then you're good to go. If there's only 4, you are going to be limited on what you want to do. Obviously, you might be limited to 2 for your GPU, then 2 for your CPU. And of course, it also has your 12 volt 2x6 if you're running an NVIDIA, or some AMD video cards are now bringing out the 12 volt high power on those cards. As I mentioned before, it is a pretty small form factor. Like this is I would say a square if I put it this way. Oh, well, not quite a square, I did lie, but look at that. It's nearly a square. It's 140mm in length. That would be from front to back in your case. And when this is in, you can see just how little room this is taken. So in this case, it can go this way, or in this case, you can also do it this way, and they just run an extension cable around the back. So super small, and it is quite affordable as well. You're looking at 120, 150, 160 for the 3 different wattages. And then lastly, the reason I really wanted to use it in this build, but the reason I could have, but then I didn't want to, because I think there's an issue with the color of the cables just on the white. If I look at the black, the cables are really nice, really nicely sleeved, braided. It might be hard to see because these are jet black, nicely sleeved, braided. Even the 12 volt high power has that little color coded connector. If you can see some blue, keep on jamming it in until you do not see any blue. But I just think these are too purple. It might be making a lie out of me on film, but if I try and put it up to something like the case or this GPU, I'm not sure if you are seeing this. I'll get a bit of B-roll compared to another branded's white cable, but I think for me, you wouldn't have seen it on the front because this case is BTF, but even on the back, I do like to show the back. Having this standout being this purpley pink color, even compared to their own PSU, I'm just trying to get a shot on all of my cameras to try and see if we can see the difference on the color of the sleeve. Now it's just a sleeve. I think they could probably revise this pretty easily. They did send me a second set when I brought this up with them, but that was exactly the same. So I have a feeling that it's the way the ink or however the dye is done on these. It kind of does look like it's dyed. This cable here seems to be completely different as well. They seem to have a few different, I wouldn't say options on the cable. The 24 pins a nice sleeve, but the peripheral is more of a plastic sort of weave. It's not a sleeve. And then that's the same as on the white here. We got 24 pins of sleeve. And then this one is definitely more like a rubbery sleeve as well, slightly different. But yeah, let me know what you think. Am I just going crazy, or do you think they should revise that? Because if you had this running in a normal case or a normal layout like this, you're gonna see that just looks a little bit off. Maybe with a bunch of RGB lighting, you're not gonna see it. It might look a little bit different. Where's something like, just wanna see how this would look if it was coming out of the GPU. Like to me, I just think that looks so off. It's just not gonna look good at all. But anyway, that's just my thoughts. That's pretty much it on the PSU. I think there are new PSUs as well coming out from Lian Li. They have so much stuff coming out. They even released some more affordable PSUs. I think they were the RS. They had the non-modular setup on those ones. And I think they also have the new LANcool 3, the one with all the clear front with the 3 fans that look like speakers in the middle. Pretty sure that's gonna come out probably end of the year, the start of next year. So it'll be sweet to check out that. But I think that is it on this content. This video has probably gone for way too long, but it was good to talk about how you can control the RGB and the fans on this case, talk about the screen, which I absolutely love, and then a quick shout out on these PSUs. But like always, I want to thank Lian Li for sending all this out to check out. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.